The next part of this course, these next few videos, I think are really one of the most important parts of the course. Because this is where everything we've talked about really comes to a head. And that is the maturations of Rahu and Ketu. Now, we get set up through our lives for the maturation of Rahu and Ketu. But we particularly get set up during this Saturn maturation. Okay, the events of the Saturn maturation are usually very closely connected to the events of the Rahu maturation, and those, of course, are connected to the events of the Ketu maturation. So as these planets mature, we're really gearing up for the most important times of our life. Now, just briefly, what are planetary maturations? They're an age at which a planet becomes mature, which means now we can use that planet to our full ability. Before that, we really couldn't use it to our full ability. We could use it, but not to the full capacity we're able to. So, which simply means until the planet matures, we won't be able to use it to our full advantage, We won't be able to use it as well as we can. We won't be able to make as much progress as we can with that planet. A real simple example of that is Mars matures at 28. Mars has to do with your strength of your mind, your focus, your determination, your strength to do. And athletes, like top cyclists, for instance, they're considered to have their peak at 28. That's when, for these long, brutal races they have in Europe, spanning multiple days, like the Tour de France, that's when these people finally get to where they really have the mental strength, the determination, and push to do the best in those races. Then after that, they have their best career. 28 to 34 is when most people win races like the Tour de France. And then their Saturn maturation comes up and they start slowing down a little bit. And it's really rare for them to win a Tour de France after the Saturn maturation. So these maturations affect us physically, they affect us mentally, they affect us biologically, and most importantly, they affect us in the context of our spiritual growth. Okay? So, Rahu gives the results of Saturn. The Saturn maturation is before Rahu maturation. The Saturn maturation leads us up. So let's look here a moment. So Mercury matures at 32. Saturn matures at 36. Rahu matures at 42. Ketu matures at 48. So when a planet gets mature, at that age, on that birthday, for Saturn, our 36th birthday, we wake up and Saturn, we can finally do what we need to with Saturn. We can finally use Saturn to our utmost capacity. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to use it to our utmost capacity. It just means we have the muscle power to do it. Same way, at 28, you have the most ability to push your way into things, to win a race, to be competitive, to be strong. But that doesn't mean you're going to be strong. It's just your capacity to do so is the highest. Okay? So just understand that maturation simply means you're finally able to really use this planet. Are you going to? Well, that depends on your chart. Okay? But on that birthday, you wake up, that planet's mature. But before that planet gets mature, there's a period of what I call growing pains. Okay? And pain's not always the right word. Let's say growth, where we're growing towards that maturation more and more rapidly. It's like all of a sudden, we're growing towards that maturation, towards being able to use that planet better our whole life. Then all of a sudden we start running to that maturation, and we make a lot of progress all of a sudden towards maturing that planet. And that always happens in the time periods between the maturations. So Mercury matures at 32, Saturn at 36. So at 34, which is right between 32 and 36, we start rapidly moving towards maturing our Saturn, which means we start getting set up for our Saturn maturation. And a lot of the things that happen to you between 34 and 36 are part of your Saturn maturation. You're working towards that point. This is the most important thing that's happening to you in your life at this time. It's more important than anything where your dashas are indicating. I find that most of the time when people come to me in real need, they're always running their maturation of a planet. And it may be the year before or the year after. So for Saturn, 35 to 37. I'll see much more than, say, 34 to 35. But be aware that there's growing pains when it comes to Saturn and Rahu and Ketu, let's call it growing pains. But when it comes to other nice planets, it's not always a growing pain, but this growth spurt towards the maturation happens in this middle place. So from 34 to 36, a person's making this growth spurt towards their Saturn maturation. Then at 36, they wake up on their 36th birthday, Saturn's mature. Now that it's mature, they can use it. They can really do this planet, okay? And they really, because they can really do this planet now, they're really going to use this planet. This planet's going to be a big part of their life from 36 to 39. And because of this, you'll see 39 as a huge year for people. Lots of times you'll see some huge things happen in a person's life at 39. Because at that point, they're starting their growing pains, their growth spurt, let's say, towards Rahu maturation, which is a 3-year growth spurt, okay? So first we're going to talk about Saturn. 34, growth spurt to 36, 36 to 39. We have the, let's use this mature planet, okay? Now, so these events, they're in this 4-year period, from 5-year period from 34 to 39, all have to do with your Saturn maturation, a 5-year block of time. And they're all there to set you up, prepare you for your Rahu maturation. If you got a troubled Saturn in any way, yes, you're getting set up for a really difficult Rahu maturation. And if you have a great Saturn and the good things about your Saturn, that's how you're being prepared to be strong and ready for your Rahu maturation. And there's always a mix. In some ways, the Saturn maturation is setting you up for a painful experience in your Rahu maturation or a painful realization. In other ways, it's preparing you to have the strength for your Rahu maturation. Okay, again, depending on the strength and well-being of Saturn. So, what happens during the Saturn maturation, and I have talked about these maturations in the, what is it called? The planetary ages videos. Okay, very important principles, these planetary ages and things like this. So, Saturn is our burdens in life. It's our ability to bear our burdens. That's a simple way of looking at it. It's our capacity to suffer. It's our capacity to keep on going when we're miserable. Okay? So, during the Saturn maturation, our capacity to bear our burdens matures. This is finally when we're as strong as we're ever going to be able to just carry our shit sack with us, so to speak, okay? This huge burden of life. Now, if your Saturn has some afflictions to it, these burdens are going to be very difficult burdens. These can be burdens that almost want to squish you, okay? And you will just literally feel like, this could be the worst part of your life. This is the time where the burdens that you might experience can be huge. Now, the burdens are not necessarily burdens coming from outside. They can be your personal burdens, your guilt, your remorse, your shame. The burdens of feeling any negative feelings about yourself. Events can come up during your Saturn maturation that just dump these painful burdens upon you. Okay? And then there might be some good things too. If you have some nice things with your Saturn, you'll feel more able to deal with the hardships of life. Okay? So it depends on the mix of your Saturn, but it's a time of when you're dealing with, your capacity to deal with your burdens is there. And because your capacity grows into a higher place at that time, well, lots of times you'll be called upon to carry bigger burdens during that time. The Bible says, God will only test you as much as you can handle. Well, the problem with your Saturn maturation is all of a sudden you can handle more. So God's like, oh, okay, you can carry more, so he fills your backpack with more shit, basically. More pain and suffering and misery, because you can handle it. And so there could be times for that. Now, the burdens of Saturn are your karmic burdens. Okay? So this is where bad events can happen during your Saturn maturation. It's like this big load of bad karma can happen to you during your Saturn maturation. Why? Because now you're strong enough to handle it. So God's been storing it up for you. saving it, saying, yeah, you have to go through this in this lifetime, but I'm going to wait. I'm going to be as nice as possible and wait until you're mature enough to handle it. Saturn maturation comes along and he starts dumping it on you. So 34 to 39, or especially 34 to 36, this is when you can start having burdens dumped on you. You can start getting horrible feelings about yourself. You can find yourself in situations where there's just no right answer and there's nothing you can do to feel right about yourself, to feel good about yourself. So you come out with this huge personal burden of some sort. Okay? Now sometimes when a person has a really afflicted Saturn, they just refuse to carry that burden and they decide to die. So you will see, yes, people dying at this time of Saturn maturation. Okay, anywhere from 34 to 39, although the most common time is 35 to 37. The year before and the year after the maturation are the most powerful times. But you'll see a person get set up or get put into this place first. I know for me, 34, the burden started coming. But 35 is when the burdens really started crushing me, you know, where they realized, like, wow, these are heavy little bastards in my backpack. But they were coming at 34, but 35 to 36, they started feeling very, very heavy. So, but it's all related. This is a long game. From 34 to your K2 maturation, there's a long game of your personal development that's coming up for you, okay? Now, if you have a wonderful Saturn, you know, like a totally delighted Saturn with no starvation, no issues with it, then when your Saturn maturation comes, you just realize how you can just manage so much troubles in life, how the problems in life just are like not a big deal, that you can just handle these things so much better than you ever could. That's really nice. You have a wonderful Saturn, great. If you're watching this video, you probably don't, because we're drawn to astrology because of our suffering. And Saturn is the planet of suffering, so if we get some starvation by the Sun, Moon, or Saturn to Sun, Moon, or Mars to Saturn, then yeah, we've got one more reason to look at our charts and figure out why life hurts, okay? So, in most cases, you're going to see mixes, some good things and bad things with their Saturn. So on one level, the person really feels they can handle certain things better, but on another level, that's the difficult parts of Saturn, they could just feel like, gosh, they're carrying a really huge burden. Now, if Saturn's very afflicted, the person literally will not feel like they can carry that burden, and they might just succumb to death, or if they can feel like they can't completely carry it, they might succumb to just illnesses and problems that make it harder for them to just deal with life, okay? Because they're literally getting crushed under this load of difficult karma, okay? And sometimes, you know, in a really troubled Saturn maturation, a really difficult one, it's like there's just this big blow of negative karma they're going to burn right here, really fast. And it could be such a big dose that that's all they need to burn. They just need to burn this big blast, and they're done with this lifetime. And so they're actually leave planet Earth during their Saturn maturation. So when people leave during Saturn maturation, when they die, it's simply because this big dose of karma is the big blast they need to burn this lifetime. And that, you know, and then it's time for them to go. So you will see, you know, death happening during this time. However, I see more people dying during the Mars maturation, and I talked about that extensively in other videos. The longevity videos and, of course, the planetary ages videos on Mars. So hopefully you're all really, really scared now. But the truth is, lots of times it's not this bad. I've seen people whose best year is 30, you know, Saturn maturation. Their best time, because they have a really nice Saturn. The Saturn maturation comes, and all of a sudden the things that always bothered them, that were stressing them, just don't bother them anymore. They just grow to a place where those things don't perturb them as much. Those little things that used to bother them seem like feathers in their backpack now. Okay? So a lot of it depends on your Saturn. You know, just what your Saturn's capable of. So from 34 to 36, the burdens start getting dumped on you. From 36 to 39, or the burdens get dumped on you because you're stronger now. But it might actually feel like you're weaker because the burden's heavier, right? You're actually stronger in what you can handle, but fate has decided to fill your backpack 3 times as heavy as it was ever filled up. And so then all of a sudden, you're carrying all this extra weight, okay? Now, the biggest burden we have is our own personal wound, you know, the deep way we feel about ourselves, the negative thing we feel about ourselves, our own personal big wound. That's really our biggest burden this lifetime. So oftentimes what happens during the Saturn maturation is situations come up that expose you to your wound, because we try to, hide from our wound, okay? Because when we hide from our wound, it doesn't feel like a burden, okay? When we can hide from our pain, it doesn't feel like we have any pain, right? Saturn maturation comes along and you don't get to hide from your pain anymore. Situations come where you just are not allowed to pretend that you're feeling any better than you really, really are. And sometimes that's not very happy, because that wound we have is carrying us, is burdening us, and making our lives somewhat miserable. And the Saturn maturation, that wound gets pushed like so hard, to where oftentimes what happens during the Saturn maturation is the thing that you would never want to do, the experience you would never want to have, happens, okay? Something that is really, the worst thing you could possibly imagine, okay? Depending on your wound. If you have an abandonment wound, I'll just run through this real quick. Read the wounds book. We will talk more about wounds in future class. If you have an abandonment wound, you might find yourself getting completely abandoned or completely abandoning somebody else. If you have a humiliation wound, you might find yourself in a really humiliating situation, or you might just start seeing yourself as a horrible, disgusting person, okay? If you have a rejection wound, you might leave somebody that's important to you, or you might get rejected, or really feel rejected by somebody important, maybe have a fallout with a parent, a lover, your children even, If you have if you have a betrayal wound, you might get cheated on. You might get used and thrown out. You might literally get betrayed by, maybe it's your boss, maybe it's your lover, who knows, maybe it's a business partner or sibling that you're involved in some kind of business, somehow where you really get betrayed really deeply, okay? Which one didn't I cover? Okay, if you have a judgment wound, you might do something that makes you see yourself as a really negative person, because judgment wants to see itself as good. So you might do something where you can't pretend to be a good person anymore. So events will come up that really make you confront your wound, okay? In a really, really big way. And again, if Saturn's in good shape, all right, your wound's not as painful, and this is not going to be such a big deal. But if your Saturn's in bad shape, you bet it can be very, very difficult. From what area of life might that come? Look at what house Saturn rules. Look at what planet Saturn's conjunct with. Look at what house Saturn's in. And usually, something in regards to that will be the thing that triggers this burden of, help letting you see the bag of pain you've been carrying. Because we've been carrying that pain throughout our whole lives. We have our wounds with us. We carry our pain with us always. But during the Saturn maturation, we get mature enough to handle our full burden. So then fate shows it to us in sometimes very, very vivid colors. The more we've been lying to ourselves and pretending that we're okay and compensating and saying, look how I'm really not this wounded creature, the more Saturn's going to beat on you during your Saturn maturation and show you really how, how hurt, wounded of a creature you really, really are. So if you're a really wounded person, your worst nightmare may come during your Saturn maturation. The nightmare will be in proportion to just how wounded you are. Okay? All right, so now everyone under 36 is scared shitless, right? But everyone who is over 36 knows that I'm talking about extreme, scary situations here. And that your Saturn maturation had some of this, but really wasn't that horrible. Okay? But I like to talk about extremes when I teach, scare you guys, make you see the worst possible case. Generally speaking, it's a mix. You get stronger, you get more mature, you can deal with things that don't get you anymore because your Saturn's maturing healthily. But yeah, you might get shown some more parts about your wound. It depends on your Saturn, okay? Then from 36 to 39, you start dealing with the fact that, you have a wound and pain. And you try to figure out how to bear it. You try to figure out, okay, how am I going to deal with this? What am I going to do to deal with this trouble? Okay? And a lot of how you're going to deal with it is going to be you're going to fall back onto your security paradigm, which is K2. And why do you fall back on your security paradigm? You're going to want to, let me not say you're not going to fall back. You're going to want to fall back on your security paradigm. Because that's where your security paradigm of K2 is where everything always worked. Because Saturn is related to K2, as I talked about, you're going to want to go there, of course. You're going to want to go back to your security paradigm. Okay? From 36 to 39, you're going to want to go back to that place where everything felt good before your wound was shown in its raw form. Okay? So from 36 to 39, you're going to try to go back to that safe place. And you just won't be able to. Your wound is too raw. The guilt, the judgment, the sense of loss you've had, the feeling of rejection, the feeling of abandonment, the way you felt like you've been cheated, whatever it is, whatever your raw wound, most deepest wound is, it's been exposed to the point that you just can't go back to the way you were before. You just can't go back to that safe K2 security paradigm. But you'll try from 36 to 39. You'll wish you could, but you won't be able to. So you have to find healthier ways to deal with your pain. You have to start finding new ways. But from 36 to 39, honestly, you usually can't really find any really wonderful new ways. The only new way you have is, can I handle more pain now that my Saturn's mature? If your Saturn's in good shape, you find yourself, yes, I've got all these wounds that are shown to me, but I can handle them better than I could when I was younger. So it's like, that's a really nice Saturn maturation. When you get your wound exposed, you see it. You realize how much of a hurt unit you are, that you can't pretend to be happier than you are anymore. But you have the strength to bear it. That's a wonderful Saturn maturation. Okay? But if you don't have the strength to bear it, because your Saturn's got some afflictions to it, some serious starvation, then you start going downhill. And you're struggling to stay. Your every day feels like a heavier day. Every day, when you take a step, it's a harder step to take. Okay? And you don't have the strength, or you do. It doesn't matter. The bottom line is, you realize you can't go back to feeling the way you did about yourself that you had before your Saturn maturation. You just can't go back there. That place is gone. So you just bear it as best you can, from 36 to 39. And if your Saturn's in good shape, you bear it pretty good. Okay? Then from 39 to 42, you start having your growth spurt to your Rahu maturation. Okay? And the growth spurt towards your Rahu maturation can be very, very intense, okay? Obviously. What happens during the Rahu maturation is that you realize that K2 is just not going to work for you anymore. You always thought K2 would work. K2 would always provide the security and safety and well-being you needed, your K2 house and K2 sign and da-da-da. And then you bore your pain from 36 to 39 as long as you could, because your wound got so sore that you realize you can't go back to K2. You just try to bear it. But at 39, you start realizing you just can't keep bearing it. And that sets you up for the growth spurt of the Rahu maturation, which is, wow, my only solution is to go to the Rahu house. So from 39 onward, you start getting these little inclinations, these little ideas that you have to go to the Rahu house, okay? And you'll try, but especially from 41 to 42, you start getting realizations that, wow, I really have to go to my Rahu house. But those can start as early as 39. The need will arise. It'll start coming to your consciousness very slowly. And you'll realize that, especially from 41 to 42, you really need to go there. And you might really try to dive into your Rahu house from 41 to 42 during that last year of growth spurt. However, there's a good chance you won't succeed. Okay, but you'll have a desperate need. You'll know that, wow, K2's not cutting it. It's not giving me what I need anymore. I have to go into the jungle. I have to try this thing. I have to go into Rahu. So this is the first time in your life that you're going to realize just how desperately you need to go to Rahu. That you need that Rahu experience in some form. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to keep going. Okay, now, if you had a tough Saturn maturation that really dumped you with huge burdens, the need for your Rahu maturation is so much more desperate. If you had a solid Saturn maturation where you just started bearing your burdens better, and even though more burdens came and you saw more your wound and you confronted your wounds more and realized how much pain you have as a human being, but you had the strength to bear that more honorably, or whatever you want to use, more functionally, then great. Then as your Rahu maturation comes, you're in a good, clear place to move towards your Rahu house purposefully and clearly. But if you've had a vicious Saturn maturation, like a brutal one that just crumpled you, made you wish you weren't alive, because just the burden that you've put on yourself, the feelings you have about yourself are so great that death is preferable, then when your Rahu maturation comes, you realize this desperate need to have this Rahu house. So it really, how desperate you are for that Rahu depends simply how much burdens you experience during your Saturn. There's a relationship to that, okay? Because again, Rahu gives the results of Saturn. The more desperate it is, the more likely it is to fail, right? Okay? Sadly, because Rahu gives the results of Saturn. So if Saturn's troubled, Rahu won't give you as good of a result. So your Rahu maturation will be more difficult, okay? But Saturn's just one component of Rahu, right? Look at Rahu's Lord. Look at other things relevant to Rahu to see if the person's going to be able to go into that Rahu house and have a better maturation. You always want to look at the previous maturation. How was that? Oh, you came out of a tough maturation? Then you're going to be struggling to be happy until your next maturation. And this is always a rule you can use. If at 16 your Jupiter maturation was brutal, you're sort of stuck with that until 21 when your sun matures. And hopefully your sun will be solid enough to give you the strength to deal with that past brutal maturation. Okay? And of course this is true also when your Rahu maturation comes. If your Saturn maturation was good, you go into your Rahu maturation, in a pretty solidly strong, confident, secure place. Okay? And then, of course, you're much more ready to deal with the problems that Rahu comes, the growth spurt of Rahu, not problems, growth spurt of Rahu, with a lot more balance. But if you have a really, really tough Saturn maturation, you're going to approach your Rahu maturation very off balance, very desperate for that Rahu house to help regain yourself. And you're going to realize, I really, really need this Rahu thing. I need this Rahu experience. Something's going to tell you that. You might figure it out yourself. Other people might tell you. Your counselor might start telling you. You might start going, yeah, that sort of makes sense now. You'll start getting aware of the need. And then at 42, your Rahu's mature. Now, I wish I could say, now that your Rahu's mature, yippee, all's good. But it's not so. The Rahu maturation simply means that now you have an idea that you really need to go to this Rahu house. Sometimes, in fact, most of the time, that's all the person really has. They come up with the realization that you just have to, I really, really need this house. I mean, my life's not going to really work well if I don't experience my Rahu house somehow, okay, better than I have experienced it so far. Because K2 is not working, right? You can't go to the castle. It's not working anymore with the realizations of your burdens that the Saturn maturation gave you. You can't go back to the K2 house and pretend to be all better and all good. So you have to go to the Rahu house. And because you realize you can't go to the K2 house, you only can go to the Rahu house. There's nowhere else to go. There's only the castle and the jungle. Those are the only two places on earth. Okay? So God helps you, not God. You help yourself by attracting things to your K2 house during your Rahu maturation that ruin your K2. Make it impossible to go down there. You know, your K2 castle starts crumbling, starts breaking down, especially from 41 to 42. Your K2 castle, all that security you had, even though it hasn't been working, literally fate can start cracking it and breaking it up and start dropping bricks in your head to where not only is it a place that's not working, it's not even a place you get to be at anymore. It's like life does not let you be in your K2 house anymore when Rahu comes. The most difficult thing about the Rahu maturation is the failure, the rupturing of your K2 house. Rahu gives the results of K2, or K2 is like Rahu, is what Parashar said. They're linked, they're the same animal. Okay, one's the head of the dragon, one's the tail of the dragon. They both are nodes of the moon. You blow on one, the other one fills with air too. Okay, if you go to one and you pat it on the head and you hear a hollow sound on the head of Rahu, then the K2, the tail, is going to make a thumping sound too. These two planets are reverberating with each other all the time. Okay? So, your Rahu maturation is coming. You have to go to the Rahu house. You realize you need to go to the Rahu house somewhat. Some people will really realize it, more conscious people. Less conscious people won't really realize it, hardly at all. They might think, yeah, maybe. And that might just be the only thought they have the whole growth spurt from 39 to 42. That might be their only clue that they need to go to the Rahu maturation. But in either case, fate sets them up by rupturing the K2 house, somehow making the K2 house not available to them anymore. So there's nowhere to go. If your castle's burning and the bricks are tumbling, you got to go outside and go into the jungle. There's nowhere else to go. And that's the hardest thing usually during the Rahu maturation, is that the K2 castle is no longer available. The security that you got from K2, from that house, how that house made you feel that you could survive and continue with life, it's just not working anymore. And if you try to make it work, pretend that it's work, it's literally going to get taken away from you. It'll literally get destroyed. And then, the only place left is Rahu. Okay? Then from 42 to 45, you go into the period of you're running and working with this mature Rahu now. You had your growth spurt. An example of a Rahu growth spurt I wanted to mention to see how these events from 39 to 42, many of our events in our life will be very related, was a woman who at 39, who had Rahu in the 10th. So she's a woman who's meant to develop her own power, be the power in her life. At 39, she realized just how over-controlling her narcissistic husband was, to where she really couldn't even spend $1 without, explaining it. Like just no rights practically. That she decided to divorce. And she divorced her husband. A year later, she met another guy, complete, absolute narcissist again. But in a different way that she didn't realize it at first. But she basically realized at 39 she has to get away from this. She has to go to a place of having more of her own power, which is 10th house, Rahu in the 10th. She knew she needed more power. She tried to grow there. She divorced her husband. She got herself she met a new guy. They married at 40. Okay, so they married at 41, but she was with him, at 40, in a committed relationship at 40. And she went really from out of the frying pan into the fire, to where she, again, was with the guy who, when it came down to it, was going to do everything his way, where she had no power anymore. And at first, when she got divorced, she decided she was going to go to college, get a degree, and take care of herself. And she started to do that for a few months, like 6 months, and then she met the new guy and fell right back into that same trap. But then at 42, she finally really, from 41 to 42, she started getting fed up with that. And really, by 42, she realized that, no, this isn't what I need. I need to get out there and do my own thing. I need to go back to school. And then she divorced this guy, and then became an independent, successful businesswoman starting from 42 onward. Okay? So she made that break into being the more powerful person. Then couple of years later, she met another guy. She married him. She makes more money than him. She has the more financial power. She brought more money into the relationship. She was the more powerful person, the more respectable person in their new partnership. So she eventually did go into that Rahu in the 10th place, okay? But from 39 to 42, she had 2 marriages. One divorced one, long-term marriage, and got into another short one that had too much of the same flavor. So there's this 3-year growth spurt of trying to get away from men who are dominating her life to become her own power in a healthy way in her life, which she eventually succeeded in. But it was a brutal growth spurt, okay? But it's all related. So you will see a lot of tragic things at 39. A lot of difficult things happen as the person starts making that growth spurt to Rahu. And those things that happen at 39 are going to be related to the Rahu position. Always look and say, how does this relate to the Rahu position? To the need for them to go to the Rahu house. Whatever is happening at 39, 40, 41 are all things that, the big things, the important things, are things that are there to help us go towards the Rahu maturation, okay? To show us the need for that. And so by 42, we really, really realize we have to go there, that there is nowhere else to go. And then we try to go there as consciously as possible, usually. As consciously as possible. What does that mean? That means based on your capacity for wisdom and insight about yourself, you will embrace going to Rahu to a greater or lesser degree. Okay? If at that point fate still has to drag you into the Rahu house screaming and kicking, then you really have to have some look into yourself. But if at that point you start embracing the needs of the Rahu house consciously and realizing I really have to go there, more very importantly, I have to go there, and I'm willing to go there, and I'm willing to be scared and go there, that's good. From 42 to 45 is very much a time your courage gets tested. Do you really have the courage to go where life has told you you have to go? Or even though life has told you over and over and over again that you have to go there, you're too scared to go there. And you still can't imagine a life there. You can't imagine going into that Rahu house, and you still hope the Ketu house will work out. Then you've got problems. By 42, you want to be in a place where you want to be done with that Ketu house. You're like willing to say, okay, screw that. I'm going into the jungle. Screw my castle. I'm going into the jungle. I'm going to carve myself a home in the jungle. The more you feel that clearly and consciously, the better you're doing with your Rahu maturation. Okay? Otherwise, you get dragged into your Rahu maturation, kicking and screaming. So the more willing you are, the better. Okay, why is it better? Because it's less painful if you're willing, right? If you have to go into the oven, it's better to go with a smile on your face, right? Because that's what it feels like sometimes with the Rahu maturation. But oftentimes it just feels like, yes, I have a huge need for this, and you want to go there. And then you have to wait for fate to provide that need. And that need can happen from 42 to 45. Okay? It doesn't happen right at 42. It doesn't always happen at 43. It doesn't always happen at 44. It doesn't always happen until 45. It'll happen sometime between 42 and 45. Most commonly, I would say it happens at 44 almost. That's a very important year according to the cards, okay? And that's oftentimes a year to reset a lot of things in your life. Get a new experience. Really, 44 is a really powerful year for getting strong experience about yourself. And that's what you need with Rahu, right? You need to find something out about yourself that's huge and profound. And 44 really provides for that. Now, if you get it at 42 or you get it at 43, you're actually a little ahead of the game because you get the most help actually at 44. But from 42 to 45, you're going to have to move towards your Rahu maturation, willingly or unwillingly. Let's say you're doing it unwillingly. Well, then the K2 house that you want to go back to is going to get more and more problematical and give you less and less and perhaps completely disappear. Okay? It might get wiped off the face of the earth. If it's something that, if it's a person or a job or anything that you hang on to in this world, it actually might just get taken away from you. You might just lose it completely. If it's a person, it could die. Okay? So it's just going to get removed. Okay? Now, if you embrace it willingly, you might actually start hoping for it. You might actually go to the astrologer, and you have Rahu in the 10th, and you might just go to the astrologer, can you predict to me when I'm going to be a successful, independent career person? You know, you might just be so willingly that you just want to know when it's going to happen and do it. And I've seen that sometimes. Some of my fun predictions were, you know, looking at a chart and saying, wow, you know, you're going to get the thing of your Rahu maturation at 43, at 44, you know. And they're like, oh, wow, I'll have to wait a year? Yeah, it's going to be another year, but it's all good. You want to go there, you'll be ready for when it comes, you know. Now, depending on your Rahu and Ketu, and depending on how developed your Rahu and Ketus are, depending how the lords of Rahu and Ketu are doing with each other, are the lords supportive of each other, are they in friend signs, or are they in inimical signs, or in trines, in 6-8 position, as we talked about, a lot of that will answer, are you able to keep some of the Ketu while you move towards the Rahu? Because not like everyone who goes into Rahu maturation, their Ketu gets wiped off the face of the earth and they don't deal with it anymore and it's all gone. There's always an element of it that you keep. The question is, how much of your castle do you get to keep in sight as you go into the jungle? That depends on your integration of your Rahu and Ketu lords, how well integrated your Rahu and Ketu are. If you've been completely imbalanced in your life with your Ketu and only been dealing with your Ketu and utterly ignored the Rahu house, that's a sign that the lords of your Rahu and Ketu are not working together. So when you got going to Rahu, you're probably going to have to utterly and completely leave the Ketu, like it's wiped off the face of the earth. But if you know, you've been able to have some Rahu in your life, not fully, but some, you've been keeping tabs on your Rahu house, let's say, then yes, it's possible, much more possible, that as you go into your Rahu maturation, you'll keep a lot of your Ketu with you, but you will refine it over the next several years and make it better. Okay? But the most important thing to remember in the Rahu maturation is that this is the time where the shortcomings, whether large or small, of your Ketu house are realized. And that you realize you do have to go into the Rahu house if you want to be a happier person. That if you just stay in the Ketu house the way it is, you're only going to be so happy of a person. Okay? And that really you do need to go into that Rahu house if you have any desire to be a happier person. And what's a happier person? A happier person is a person who knows themselves more and who has confronted themselves more. So as they go into the Rahu maturation, they start getting the experiences to help themselves know themselves more, to see themselves more honestly. Okay? Experiences that risk the triggering of their wound. Because when we go into the Rahu house, we feel like we're risking everything. We're risking the wound, our wound getting pushed very hard. And then we're off to a good Rahu maturation if we go there. And we find something out about ourselves. We discover something about ourselves, and we start feeling better about ourselves if we do that. Okay, when we go into that Rahu house and we have a good experience, or a meaningful experience, I think is a better word. We find something out meaningful about us that makes us a stronger person, a person, let's say, who's more ready to grow. Because as your other planets mature, you basically get stronger in doing something conscious in life. Okay? But when Rahu and Ketu mature, you finally become ready to grow. You can almost look at it as there's 3 stages to life. Okay? The first stage of life is you are conceived and you're a fetus for 9 months. The second stage of life is you're born and you mature physically and mentally. And the third stage of your life is the Rahu maturation, where you become a person who can actually grow. Grow beyond the limitations of your family. Grow beyond your karmic limitations. This is literally what's happening. There's a Western system of astrology called Draconian astrology, where the first house is Rahu. And literally they read the chart from Rahu, for crying out loud. And so it's like a first house. It's a first house is the birth house, right? It's the house that we literally call it Janma, which means birth of me. Okay? Birth of myself, birth of I. So they use it as an ascendant, as a birth house, because it is literally a placement of birth, of the birth of you as an individual that can grow beyond your karmic experiences, beyond your ancestral DNA. Okay, so now you're finally grown up to be a person that can grow. Before that, you really couldn't grow. You know, not really. You might thought you grew, but you really didn't. You just became mature in what you were. You finally just grew up into a person who has the capacity to grow as an adult. Okay, I know that's really sad, you know, because you think about, gosh, 42 years just to get to the point that I could actually grow. It's like, 42 years to get to the point that you can actually really grow above and beyond your past life. Okay? Until then, you're just burning karma, learning a few things to set you up and mature you so that you can grow. I really think, and again, this is just a theory, that anyone who achieved enlightenment before 42, perhaps even before 48, the K2 maturation, they were enlightened last time too. They're avatars. They were enlightened beings that came back. So Jesus, Adi Shankaraya, all these dudes who died, you know, who were enlightened, were enlightened before the Rahu K2 maturation, they had achieved that level of growth in a previous life. Okay, it's not to mean they're not going to go into deeper states of enlightenment this lifetime, but the growth of this lifetime really happens after 42. Okay, and that's just something I've seen over and over again. I see how people grow and how they think they're growing, and I find out, geez, we're really not growing very much until our Rahu K2 starts, and that's when growth can really, really happen. And I might not be right about those theories, but practically speaking, it certainly looks that way. Okay? All right, so at 42, you're mature enough to grow. Okay, well, what does that mean, mature enough to grow? Mature enough to grow is when you start realizing that what's happening around you is not being done to you. It's about who you are. Okay? When you have that realization that what's happening around you is because of who you are and not something that's being done to you, only then can you begin to grow. And that's the property of the number 8. When you realize that the outer events are nothing but a reflection of your insides, of how you relate to yourself, how you feel about yourself. And when you realize that, now you're ready to grow. Until then, you're not ready to grow. Until then, you're ready to fight and argue and debate and push and shove, you know. But you're not ready to grow until you realize that everything in your life is a symbol of what's happening right inside yourself, okay? So at Rahu, we become capable of that realization, really truthfully, not just on paper, but in reality. We start becoming, we develop a consciousness that's much more ready to embrace that than it ever was. Now, that's not to say that at 32, you didn't feel that way and see that truth. But if you did, that's because you brought it from your past life. I'm talking about taking that truth to the next deeper level, to the next most significant level. This is what's happening in the Rahu maturation. Okay? Your K2 house is burnt, you go into the jungle, and you find something out about yourself. And one thing you always find out about yourself is that the jungle is as scary as you are scared. That the jungle is as lonely as you are lonely. That the jungle is as selfishly not giving as you selfishly not give to yourself. That essentially the jungle and how that jungle feels, it only has to do with how you feel and nothing else. Okay? And if you realize that from 42 to 45, then you've got to a point of being able to be honest with yourself. And this most likely happens right at 44 and 45. Okay? 45 is a critical year because now you're going towards start making your growth spurt towards your K2 maturation. You needed, from 39 to 42, you needed this Rahu experience. You became aware every year more and more, I need my Rahu house, I need my Rahu house, I need my Rahu house. From 42 to 45, you get an experience of your Rahu house. And this experience of your Rahu house starts changing something about you. Okay? God will give you the exact experience you need to start this change. Now, The only way to ruin this experience, really, to not get the most out of this experience that God wants you to, is the inability to go to the Rahu house without intoxication. Okay? Going to the Rahu house sometimes is a crazy experience. People will blame you for going to the Rahu house. Rahu's an outcast, right? When you start going to your Rahu house, you might do things that upset people, that make people criticize you, that make people lose hope for you, whatever the case may be. Condemn you, curse you, who knows what they're going to do when you go to your Rahu house. And that's oftentimes why it's so scary to go to the Rahu house. But as long as you go there without being doped up, drugged up, whatever, then you're going to that house just right, in a way that you can experience it with your full consciousness, which is all that you need to do. Okay? So I never criticize anyone when they go to the Rahu house, no matter what that means, unless they're doing it half, stoned. Okay? Because we can't really do it stoned. If a person's going there stoned, what does that mean? Well, that means that coming into this lifetime, they never got to the place of being able to face life with enough courage. And so they were getting stoned last lifetime to deal with the hard things, and getting drunk last lifetime to deal with the hard things. So they're still doing it this lifetime. Yet these people, oftentimes, it'll be 42 to 45 when they decide to stop that. This is when people decide, geez, you're right, I am an alcoholic, time to quit. Okay? So this is when people are ready to grow. You'll see it. You'll see so many recovering alcoholics, 42 to 45. So many people decide to get off their addictions because all those patterns were where they were left off last lifetime. And now this lifetime, okay, I'm in a place where I have more maturity to grow. I can move forward in my life without my drugs, without my addictions. Okay? And sometimes people will get an experience from 42 to 45 that helps them realize they don't need their addictions anymore. If you have some nice things with your Rahu, you might have an experience that makes you go, I don't need my addiction, my eating disorder, my whatever addiction I have, my workaholic addiction. So you will see people go into a healthier state of being from 42 to 45. They're letting go of addictions because they're more ready to truly grow. Okay, so it can be a very positive time too. It is a very positive time. But for everyone, there's, different confusions to sort out, different difficulties to deal with, different beautiful things to help them. And I find that in general, again, it's such a customized thing, it's different for everyone. The 39 to 42 year can be very burdensome and painful. The more difficult the Saturn maturation was, the more painful 39 to 42 is. Because during that time, they become more and more aware that the Ketu house is not going to solve their problems. And then they have less and less hope. Because Ketu is always going to solve our problems, is what we think, right? But from 39 to 42, we realize more and more it's not going to. And we realize more and more I got to go to another place. But then it's so easy to believe that place doesn't exist for me. Because we don't believe we can survive in the jungle. We don't believe there's a home in the jungle for us. Okay? And it literally is about making a home. We're talking about the nodes of the moon. Okay? The moon is our home, right? It's a kark of home. Mars is the building that we live in, the house. But our home, the home is our moon. And so, until we bring Rahu and Ketu into our home, we'll never feel we're at home. So at Rahu maturation, the afterwards, 42 to 45, one thing we'll get, depending on how good our chart is as a whole, how willingly we went to Rahu and so on, we'll get an experience of the Rahu that helps us realize what it is we really need to be happy on earth, at peace with life, to be at home. You got to have your Ketu and your Rahu house connected together in your life to feel at home. Okay, because they're the nodes of the moon. They're the nodes of your home. How can we look at that? Well, here's your moon. Here's Rahu, here's Ketu. These are like balances of your home. Your home, moon's your home, and the Rahu and Ketu are like these two ends of a balance. And you're trying to walk a tightrope of life so that you feel like I'm at home. This planet's my home, my house is my home, my job is my home, my family is my home, etc., etc. Okay? I'm at home. Versus Ketu saying, you're a mixed caste, you belong nowhere. And Rahu saying, you're an outcast, no one wants you. Okay? That's what these planets do to us. They make it impossible for us to be at home. We literally feel that if we embrace our Rahu house, that no one's going to want us. So look at what your Rahu house represents and ask yourself, if I had that, would I feel like an outcast? Would I feel people would disparage me and throw me out? When I think about that, and I think of my Rahu house, when I think of what my mother would say to me if I said, Mom, I want my Rahu house, I would feel like an outcast. And if you're honest with yourself and you think about it closely, you'll realize, yeah, if you told everyone, your parents and your relatives, that, yeah, I'm going to my Rahu house, they would go, they would outcast you. Get out. Be gone, you know. And if, you know, and that's one reason we don't want to go to the Rahu house, because we don't want to be an outcast from our family. But we have to be an outcast from the family. We have to tell our family, like, hey, I'm moving out of the castle and I'm moving into the jungle. We have to at some point do that, okay? So then, K2 is the mixed caste, okay? So you can belong at the K2 house. You can fit into the mixed, no, I'm sorry, you can't belong to the K2 house. You can fit into the K2 house, but you can never truly feel at home there as a mixed caste. So we got these two ends of your home. The mixed caste part that can fit but not really belong, and the Rahu part who can be shunned and outcast. And somehow we have to build a home on earth, which means develop a peace in our consciousness. Because what is home? It's a place of peace. We have to develop a peace in our consciousness that's a result of integrating Ketu and Rahu. And then we can watch that tightrope of peace. Got it? Okay. Where our outcast side, our mixed caste side, are accepted within ourselves. Okay? The mixed caste side of Ketu, what is that? That's an amalgamation of everyone's needs you grew up with, of your parents' needs, your mother's needs, how you're trying to please your parents and your father, how you're trying to please your mother, how you're trying to please your father, which means how you're trying to please your ancestors, right? Because your mom and dad are behaving in a way that was designed to please their parents, and their parents were behaving in a way that designed to please their parents. So essentially, the mixed caste of Ketu is the mixture of a being that you are as a result of trying to fit in with your parents and please your parents and be okay with your parents. But you can never really fit in because you're not your parents, right? You're a different being. Then there's a part of you that's an outcast, the black sheep part of you, that just doesn't fit into that family. Why? Because you're an individual. There's something different about you, something special about you, something that makes you beautiful. That's not part of that gene pool's reality, not part of your parents' reality. And you have to embrace that part of yourself. And then you're at peace, then you're at home. Okay? So, during the Rahu maturation, depending on the well-being of your chart, which means how consciously you go to your Rahu house, and depending on the fate of your Rahu house, you get an experience that helps you feel at home with your outcast part. The part of you that's shunned, for the first time, feels like it can come home. Okay, that it has, its existence is desirable, that it's allowed to exist, that its existence is even welcomed. Okay? You might meet a person that sees something in you, welcomes in something in you that no one ever mentioned. You might discover something in yourself that gives you so much happiness that you're like, where was this part of me in my whole life? Okay? Look for something during 42 to 45. And again, it so often happens at 44. Okay? Something within you that is a different part that you were never able to fully accept, that becomes a beautiful experience somehow. Okay? And that helps you come to a place, begins to help you to come to a place of peace with yourself. At that point, the burdens of Rahu, the wound of Rahu, the burdens of your Saturn maturation, the wounds of your Saturn maturation start to heal. Okay? And then you sink down into 45, the middle of the Rahu the middle between Rahu and Ketu. So at 45, your Rahu maturation's not only over, it matures at 42, and then you work with this new maturity from 42 to 48 to get a better Rahu experience. To get, better is not a better word, a deeper Rahu experience. But there's a problem still, okay? You came to some more point of peace with yourself. You started realizing that how you feel, what happens in your life is a reflection of how you feel. And that things that happen to you are here to show you how you feel about yourself. And you get this capacity for growth, okay? Then at 45, your life is still a mess. One of the number one times people kill themselves is 45. When people suicide, you can guess you did it at 45. And you'll be right more so than if you picked any other age, okay? This is the rebirth year in the card. And it happens right between Rahu and Ketu maturation. So this is where your Rahu maturation, you've ran with what you've learned, you've matured, you've used that new maturity to a certain degree, and now it's time for Ketu to mature. And the problem with that is, now you're returning home to face yourself. During the Rahu maturation, you went to that strange world, the jungle, and you learned something about yourself, okay? But now at 45, you have to come back and face yourself, okay? And this is the scary part. This is the most difficult part of your journey, okay? The hero has gone out, he's done his quest, he's gotten his magical weapon, and that was hard. That was difficult, that was challenging, that was scary. He had to go into the abyss, had to swim underneath the dragon, he had to do all these crazy, scary things, okay? But he got it done. But now he has to return home to fight the big battle. This is the really scary monster. And this monster is ourself. This is where we truly have to start facing ourselves, okay? So from 45 to 48, we start to have to face ourselves. Some people don't want to face themselves. And you'll see this in their health, in their pathologies, in their face, you know. Are they willing to face themselves? This is the most critical time for a person willing to face themselves. Lots of times people will decide to run. Okay, they don't want to face themselves. They'll just try to run. I know from my own experience, when I was in my 39 to 42, the awareness that I needed to experience my Rahu house in a different way became very prominent. I had an experience of my Rahu house, a deeper experience of my Rahu house. And I knew I needed my Rahu house, something in the world, because the Rahu house is something in the world. It's a place you go to on earth, you know. And then when the Ketu, after 45, I was still a miserable bastard, because you're going to be miserable until you completely mature, right? Your capacity for happiness, if you survive all the way to your Ketu maturation, is so much greater than before. And from 45 to 48, I became aware that I still wasn't okay. I still wasn't as happy as a being I wanted to. But there was no desire to go chase something. There was no something to go experience something. I just decided to face myself. You know, I literally just said, okay, I'm just going to let myself experience what I experience. I'm going to suffer what I suffer. I'm going to just stick with it. I'm not going to run with it. I'm not going to try to do anything about it. I'm just going to sit here until it resolves itself. Is literally my strategy, which means I'm going to sit here and face myself. Facing ourselves is not that hard. We just have to stay with our misery. We have to acknowledge the miserable things we feel. We have to acknowledge the horrible things that come up about ourselves. But instead, we want to run. Some people at 45 want to run so fast, they decide to just go kill themselves. Okay? At 45, I had some severe losses in my life. You know, some of my most cherished things from when I was a kid that held me together throughout my life were lost at 45. Things that were the healthy escapes that I would go to find a sense of peace in this crazy world, taken away at 45. Okay? Including a friend of mine who was like my father figure, who was the father I never, not the father I never had a father, but who was like my super father. He also passed away. So, I mean, I lost literally 3 huge things of comfort in my life. And so, when those comfortable things leave, what do? You have to face yourself. When those things leave, it's a time of, okay, time to face yourself. Now, sometimes people don't want to face themselves. It just seems too impossible, too scary. So at 45, they might dip into drugs, alcoholism, kill themselves, go through the crazy midlife crisis of sheer escapes, just trying to run from themselves as fast as they can. But that will get you nowhere, because no matter where you run to, you're still there, right? You'll always be there at the same time. So you can't run from yourself. So 45 to 48, you have to just have the willingness to face yourself, to be with yourself. I make jokes about it now, and again, this intensifies at 47 to 48 as you go into the K2 maturation. From 47 to 48, I felt like I was PMSing for 7-8 months. Like I was an emotional train wreck for months, Just all these feelings coming up. And I just felt like I was processing lifetimes of emotional pain. Just dealing with lifetimes of pain. And I would just tell my wife, I think I'm going to be a wacko the entire month. I'm sorry, but this is just how I'm feeling. I'm feeling like an absolute wacko, But I'm just going to do it, and I'm not going to try to fix it, and I'm not going to try to do something else to make it go away. I'm just going to sit here and be an emotional train wreck until it's resolved. We just have to face ourselves during this period of K2 maturation. Now, the problem we have, not the problem, but the way things work, Rahu and K2 are always in this equilibrium, okay? We go to Rahu and we get a Rahu experience, okay? And we realize something about ourselves. But the problem is, we still can't make the Rahu house work as good as we need it to. Okay? We just can't make it work as good as we want it to. Because eventually, we need the Rahu house to work as successfully and tend to work as easily for us as the K2 house worked, right? We have to be as comfortable in that jungle as we are in our palatial room in our castle. We have to be at home in the tent, in the jungles, in the mud, taking a cold river's bath, as we are in our castle where we get a nice hot bath, followed by a steam bath, followed by a wonderful massage. We have to be equally happy in both places. But the problem is, even though you go into that Rahu place from 42 to 45, and you get perhaps the best Rahu experience of your life, you're still can't maintain it. You can't, you found one little nice place in the jungle, one little, place where the hot water came into the river, and so yeah, you could survive there. Okay, and take a nice warm bath out in the jungle. But you still couldn't really enjoy that jungle. You really couldn't use that jungle to the maximum value of that jungle. You couldn't get the most out of it. So plainly speaking, though you tapped into your Rahu house, you weren't able to get that Rahu house to really, really work completely. And then the question is, why? You perhaps had the best opportunity in your life to make that Rahu house work. The opportunity you dreamed about your whole life maybe came from 42 to 45 to make your Rahu house work. Yet you failed it. Even though it was your best possible circumstance ever, and you still screwed it up. That's what's going to happen. That's the conundrum of 42 to 45. The best possibility that you've experienced comes in your Rahu house, and you screwed it up. Somehow it didn't work, or somehow it appeared that fate intervened. But what really happened was you simply were not okay enough with yourself to allow yourself to have it. Okay? You had issues that kept you from really running with that Rahu house and really making it work in the way that you need to, which means to be as comfortable with that Rahu house, to have that Rahu house working as good as your K2 house. Okay? The only reason you failed at that time was because you weren't okay enough with yourself, which means your wound got in the way. If you had an abandonment wound and you have fear of abandonment, it's because you got so scared that this would lead to abandonment somehow, that you shut down. Okay? Or you were so scared it would lead to rejection that you shut down. Okay? And again, when we think of these wounds, we experience these very readily from our partner. But we experience these wounds from everybody, okay? But some situation made our wound feel threatened. We're still not okay enough with ourselves. If it was a judgment wound, we just couldn't see ourselves doing it and still be a good person. If it was a humiliation wound, we just couldn't find the worth in ourselves to allow ourselves to have something really good. And so we decided to lower ourselves and to accept something lesser. It was a betrayal wound. It's because we were so sure that life would cheat us again, you know? So basically, we're not okay enough with ourselves to really balance that Rahu house completely. Okay? We're better at it than we ever were. We did a better job than ever, but we can't reach that pinnacle where we really, really want. The reason is because we're just not okay enough with ourselves. Okay? And then so how can we solve this problem? Because our problem is Rahu and Ketu are not in balance. We're not at peace with our mixed parts of Ketu and our unique part of Rahu. We're not at peace with these parts of ourselves. The needs for our Rahu and the needs for our Ketu. We're not at peace with these. These are our push-pull within us, okay, tearing us up. And we weren't okay with ourselves. So the solution is to find out why we weren't okay with ourselves. To face ourselves and look in the mirror and say, okay, why was I not okay with myself? What is wrong in me? What do I see as wrong in me? What do I see that I still have to prove to myself before I let myself have any happiness on this planet? Before I let myself just be a happy person on this planet or another planet or anywhere. Because essentially what we do, because we're not okay with ourselves, we decide to be miserable even when good experiences come. So Rahu maturation might have given us a wonderful experience, and we managed to turn that experience into a miserable experience because we're simply not okay enough with ourselves to have a wonderful experience, okay? To maintain a wonderful experience, to live in a world where life actually works out the way we want it to. Because how we want it to work out don't matter. How we feel we deserve to have it work out is everything. And that determination is made by Ketu. Because Ketu is our karmic burdens. It's every bad little thought we have about ourselves, every good little thought. It's our karmic boatload. And on this, in this world and probably most other worlds, the amount of stupid things we can do is pretty unlimited, right? The amount of ways we can hurt people is pretty unlimited. The amount of ways we can fail is pretty unlimited. Compared to the amount of ways that we can actually be a benign force for good, right? As a result, we've all had karmic experiences where we've decided to condemn ourselves. Where we've decided to say, you're evil, or I'm evil, I'm worthless, I don't deserve this, I feel horrible for doing this. And so we come into life and whip our wounds. We whip ourselves into a bloody mess. And we have to face how we're really doing that. We have to face how we didn't allow ourselves to have a better life. How we decided we had to be a certain way. A way that set us up for disappointment after disappointment, for loss after loss, for our wound to be triggered again and again and again. And now we have to face ourselves and see how it wasn't fate. It wasn't our circumstances. It was our choices made out of a wounded sense of self. Out of a self that is not okay with having a good life. That truly your life sucks for only one reason. And that is because you are not okay enough with yourself to have a good life. And it takes a lot of courage to face that part of yourself. Because this is the real shit in yourself. It's so much easier to say, my mother, my father, fate, circumstances, the things I have to do, my responsibilities. It's so easy to blame the reason our life sucks on these things, especially parents, okay? But the truth is, our life sucks to the degree that it sucks for only one reason, and that is because we don't feel okay enough with ourselves to have our life be any better. Okay? And now we have to face this. When you start facing this during your 45 to 48 of K2, you realize there's nowhere to go. There's no one to help you. K2 is an isolated planet, right? It's a solitary planet. It's an introverted planet. It's a planet that can't be reached by anything out there. It only can be reached by yourself. So at this point is the time for serious introverted work, to pay attention to what you're feeling, to work with your feelings, to become honest with your feelings, to be honest about the horrible things about yourself, to admit to yourself how you really feel on your most deepest level, ways that you don't want to tell, that you're just absolutely ashamed to tell. That if you wrote the biography of your life and included those things, you wouldn't want anyone to read that book until you were dead. And those are the things you have to acknowledge to yourself. You know, the most horrible ways you feel about yourself, how you've really just set yourself up for disappointment after disappointment. And you start having to face, first, all the pain as a result of that. From 45 to 48, it just seems like all the pain that you've set yourself up for starts coming to the surface. And it's a huge purging. Like I said, it can feel like you're purging lifetimes of pain. Because you've been whipping yourself for lifetimes and abusing yourself for lifetimes and been feeling like a guilty, undeserving, worthless cretin of a being for lifetimes. And now all those feelings have to come out. And you'll look around and you might go, wow, my life is really good. Oh my God, I feel like horrible. Lifetimes of pain. These pains aren't from now. I have no reason to blame these feelings on my life right now. I'm blaming these feelings on my life on these feelings being my feelings, my real feelings about myself. And that's a very, very scary place to go. Most people don't want to go there. If people from 45 to 48 who don't want to go there will just get deeper into their addictions, worse into their negative things, try to escape into the K2 house in a really sneaky way, in a way that they don't have to confront themselves, which means an absolutely unsuccessful way, where they try to go into their K2 house, fail, try to go to their K2 house in another way and fail, try to go there, try to find a worldly security. By go to their K2 house, I mean try to find something that is that house in this world and clinging to it, and it'll fail, and it'll fail, and it'll fail like it never failed before. Because at this point, they just have to confront themselves and take a fully honest look at themselves and just really truly see themselves for the first time. So K2 maturation is really about learning to really see ourselves. I feel like we see ourselves with pretty heavy blinders until K2 maturation. Okay? Once K2 maturation happens, for the first time in our life, we're mature enough to really see ourselves. Okay, to really look in the mirror and see what's looking back at us. Okay? And then we have the huge test of compassion. Are you able to be okay with yourself? Now that you see yourself, are you able to be okay with yourself? And this is the crux of the K2 maturation and the years after that. Once you get to where you're forced to see yourself from 45 to 48, at 48, your mirror is as much in the face as it's ever going to be. You're going to be stuck looking at yourself as much as you would ever be stuck looking at yourself. And now you have to resolve what you see. And that's not going to happen from 48 to 49 or 49 to 50. It's going to be the rest of your life. After K2 maturation, there is no other maturation. You're going to continue to work with what you see, to become more and more and more okay with what you see in yourself, until you become, and every year you'll become more at peace with yourself, because every year the things you've seen in yourself, you come to greater peace with them. And so every year you come greater peace with things and greater peace with things, until finally year by year goes and you continue to be a more and more peaceful person. And by a peaceful person, I mean peaceful in the sense of spiritual peace, where you have a peace within you that doesn't require the running around and the chasing and the pursuing. A contentment from being okay with yourself. The K2 maturation is truly all about being okay with yourself. And now, 48 matures. Okay, you've been forced to face yourself. K2's mature. You're learning now to be okay with yourself. From 40 on to the rest of your life, you're just going to learn to be more and more okay with yourself. To more and more love yourself. To more and more accept yourself. To more and more be able to be with yourself. If you succeed in this, as things die in your life, as your kids leave, as your parents die, as your wife dies, as your friends start dying, all these things are things you grieve over, but none of them are a loss because you're okay with yourself and you're not using any of these things to escape. But if you didn't look at yourself, you didn't see yourself during the K2 maturation, and as a result, you never had the opportunity to become more and more okay with your shit and your stuff, then when your kids leave, you finagle in their business and try to control their lives and get hurt when they don't call you for Christmas. When your spouse dies, you know, your life crumbles apart and you don't have that escape. When your poodle dies, you know, you go into despair. You're simply still trying to cling on to things because you don't have the peace of being okay with yourself. So you'll see this happen with a lot of elderly people. Instead of being at peace, they're still talking about the battles in their life from long ago. They're still talking about the shit from their life and long ago. They're still talking about the things people did to them when they were 15, 16, 17, 69, 70, up until the age they are. And I've seen old people like that. One person I know swallowed a shotgun at 75. And when you had the pleasure of this person's company, all he did was complain about what this person did to me, what this person did to me. And he even said once to me, he goes, when I was 15 is when I realized that the whole world was against me. It's like, wow. And he never changed his mind about that. Complete failure of the K2 maturation. Okay? Utter failure, lack of peace to such a point that they swallowed a shotgun at 75. Okay? So this is not what we want to do. Now the greatest part of our life begins from 48 onward. Now is the time of truly becoming okay with yourself, becoming at peace with yourself. And now, as you're becoming more okay with yourself, you can finally have a balance with your Rahu house. So you have to go into the jungle, and you have to have an experience there and develop as a person who can grow by going into that jungle. Because in the castle, you can't grow. The castle's stagnant. So you go into the jungle and you have a chance to grow. And now that you started growing, there's no stopping you. Okay? Once you start growing, you're just going to keep growing. So you go into the Rahu and you have an experience that is the cornerstone of you growing, of you realizing what your path of growth is. But you can't make that work. You can't really live in the jungle happily until you're okay with yourself. And then you become more okay with yourself during the K2 maturation. Now the question is, now that I'm okay with myself, what's going to change in my life? Okay? So say you had a humiliation wound and you always had to put yourself into a position of being the lesser. So you didn't take their job promotions. You worked for the meanest boss you could find who would always say mean things to you and humiliate you. But now all of a sudden you're okay with yourself. Do you keep that job or move on? Well, now that you're okay with yourself, you change that job. If you've been with an abusive spouse, and now you're okay with yourself, are you going to stay with your abusive spouse? No. You're going to demand that your abusive spouse gets the therapy they need to respect you, or failing that, you're going to leave your abusive spouse. So now that you're okay with yourself, everything in your life can change. Because up until the K2 maturation, everything you have in your life, every major choice you made in your life, had a connotation of, I'm making this choice because I'm not okay with myself. I'm not doing the best choice, I'm doing a lesser choice because there's a part of me that I want to whip because I'm not okay with myself, so I am going to continue to punish myself. Therefore, I'm making a choice that offers an element of punishment to me. Okay? Now when the K2 maturation comes and we become more okay with ourselves, it's like, okay, Now that I'm more okay with myself, I can choose an option that has less punishment. Notice I said less. Sorry, I said less. I wish I could say no punishment. But see, once K2 matures is when we begin to be able to be truly okay with ourselves. But it's not like we're going to be 100% okay with ourselves overnight. Okay? We're going to spend the rest of our lives becoming more and more okay with ourselves. More and more real with ourselves. More and more accepting of ourselves. And then, from that foundation, we're going to make different choices in life. Healthier choices. Choices that nourish us, heal us, build our mental, emotional, and physical health. Instead of choices that drain us and demean us and destroy us, which are choices we've been making because we weren't okay with ourselves, which means we wanted to be punished. All right? So the K2 maturation is a time of resolving the karmic situations, resolving within us the repercussions of our past actions and being okay with them, so we no longer have to give ourselves the punishment of bad karma. Okay? K2 is our bad karma and our good karma. But this is bad karma we're interested in right now. K2 is the results of our actions. We've done actions we regret, and so therefore we are going to punish ourselves until we decide, all right, I've paid my fine. I've paid my dues. And we do that at K2 maturation. We realize, okay, I've punished myself enough. Whatever it is that I condemn myself for doing in my past existences, I've paid the jury, I paid the hangman, whatever you want to call it. I paid off my debt to society, whatever. So I'm a free person, and now I can start building my life based on having paid my debt. And now what are you going to do? Are you going to live healthy and conscientiously? Or are you going to live unconsciously and create a whole new karmic debt load? This depends on truly how much you become okay with yourself. If you don't become okay with yourself much, you're still going to act in a way that creates a lot of negative karma. You're going to still act in a way that causes you to want to punish yourself. If you become truly okay with yourself, then whatever you do in life, you'll have no karma attached to it. There'll be no attachment to your actions. As we're meant to do. Spiritually, we're supposed to have no attachment to our actions. Krishna says the human right is towards activity, not the fruits of the actions. If we're attached to the fruits of the actions, we're screwed. We're not supposed to be attached to the fruits. We're only supposed to act in accordance with our best intelligence. Does that mean we'll always do the right thing? No. Why? Because anytime God wants to, He will make us do the wrong thing. Okay, that's His business. That doesn't mean we're not meant to be okay with ourselves. It's like a movie. The scriptwriter says, Robert De Niro is going to go psycho and kill 20 people in this movie. Okay? So Robert De Niro has to go psycho and kill 20 people in the movie. So, that was his role. That was his script. Okay? After the movie's over, does he go put himself in jail? No. He's like, oh, it's just a movie, right? Well, we're meant to do the same thing. If God requires us to play a certain part in this life, we're going to play it. And we need to be okay enough with ourselves to let God use us as He wills without punishing ourselves. With just the understanding that we're trying our best. But yes, God will trick us. God will play us. God will make us fill a role that He needs us to fill, whether we want to or not. And if in filling that role, we condemn ourselves, then it's really no different than an actor who plays the villain in a movie, turning himself into the police station after the movie's over and saying, I murdered 20 people, so put me in jail. Like, who'd you murder? Well, did you see that movie, Psycho Postman? Where that was me killing 20 people at the post office. They're like, oh, wow, well, okay, you're right, let's put you in jail. No, that's not, no one would do that, right? Yet we do that to ourselves all the time. It really shocks me when I get into people's K2s, when I hear them talk about the harshness of their upbringing, just the sheer punishment they suffered as children, like just sheer punishment of how they suffered as children. And then as I talk to them more about their K2s, I find out that they're punishing themselves that same way all the time. And then I go into their Dwadasamsha chart, and I go, aha, this is the reason you're punishing yourself. Because in your past life, you did this thing. Something happened. Not even you did this thing, but something happened. You had an experience that made you decide to condemn yourself. And now you're paying that price of condemnation from the day you were born with parents who were not suitable parents. And after that, with partners who were not suitable partners. And after that, something else that wasn't suitable. You decided to punish yourself. And the theme is the same. Look at how your parents treated you. Look at how your boss treats you. Look at how your spouse treats you. And see the theme of punishment? The same punishment in lots of different flavors. It's like going to Baskin Robbins for punishment. You got like 33 flavors or something of punishment. But it's all ice cream. It's all the same abuse. Just coming in slightly different flavors. And that's what we do to ourselves. Okay? We will have a course on the Dwadasamsha and Rahu and Ketu later. But I want everyone to absorb this course first, because this course is huge. There's years of information here to contemplate and study. And we don't want to go too fast and get and blow our minds, right? So, when the Ketu maturation happens and you learn to be more okay with yourself, now what? How's your life going to change based on being a person who's okay? Well, it'll change to the degree that you were not okay with yourself before that. If your actions before that were 90% based on not being okay with yourself, then as you become more okay with yourself, you'll have big changes in your life. But if you came in with let's say a better K2, okay? I mean, if you came in being a more okay person with yourself, then as you become a little bit more okay during your K2 maturation, the changes won't be as drastic. But the changes after your K2 maturation, 48 onward, have to do with, now that you're okay with yourself, how's your life going to change? How are you going to be more sincere to yourself? Okay? Now, if a person fails their K2 maturation because they have a bad chart, then probably they failed their Rahu maturation, which means that they weren't able to really experience the Rahu, which means they weren't to get to a place where they can truly grow this lifetime. Not being able to truly grow, they can never truly confront themselves and be okay with themselves. It's like the hero who goes on the journey to get the magical weapon so he can defeat the monster who wants to eat his village, and he never gets the magical weapon. So he comes back and tries to fight this monster with a baseball bat, and of course he gets eaten by the monster at the K2 maturation. And that's what literally can happen. In a difficult chart, a person won't make a lot of progress with their Rahu and Ketu. I don't want to use the word fail. The word I'd rather use is they'll make little progress. It's impossible to fail our Rahu and Ketu maturations. The question is, how much do we excel at them? How much do we rock and roll with our Rahu Ketu maturations? Which means, when Ketu is mature, how much have we become a person who's more okay with themselves? And that's the bottom line. Are you more okay with yourself now? Or are you still playing all those games, making all those choices that a being who just utterly hates themselves, who doesn't like parts of themselves, who tries to deny parts of themselves, hides parts of themselves, rejects parts of themselves, tries to compensate for part of themselves, is constantly doing? See, when you try to do all those things, that's when you create bad karma. When you're at peace with yourself, you don't create bad karma. It's not possible. Let's say that you're not okay with yourself, and so you have to prove that you're intelligent. Then everywhere you go, you have arguments with people, right? And now you're creating all this bad karma because you're argumentative with everyone, because you're trying to prove that you're, a good person. No, when you're at peace, you don't argue with everyone. You're at peace with everyone, right? And you don't have any bad karma or good karma. You don't create karma when you're at peace. When you're at peace, you're at peace, okay? Which means you maintain an equilibrium of being and an equilibrium of karma, okay? So that's why we say Om Shanti after meditation, which Om is the vibration, the cosmic intelligence that's making everything manifest. Shanti is peace. So we want to be this peaceful form organism, this peaceful consciousness in this ocean of cosmic intelligent vibration that's making everything happen. When we're that, we're part of that vibration. We're rolling with that vibration. We're not in contrary to that vibration. We're not trying to be a different vibration than we are. And when we try to be a different vibration than we are, by compensating, by needing to prove ourselves and da-da-da-da-da, by running from ourselves, by not having peace, then we create disturbances in the ocean, which means energetic imbalances, disharmonies that have to be resolved upon us as bad karma. So we want to maintain peace. Peace is a critical part of our spiritual lives. Okay? And it only comes from being okay with ourselves. Peace is being okay with yourself. Okay? And then peace gets deeper and deeper as you get more and more in touch with the self that you're okay with, that you accept. And ultimately, the self we have to accept is the self that is the soul. And that's the ultimate goal of K2. The problem is, when we've decided to punish ourselves because we're not okay with ourselves, then what happens is the soul is not allowed to be present. Only the ego can be present when we punish ourselves. Only the ego can be beat and flogged and beat and made to feel good. The soul can't experience that. So when you feel the need to punish yourself and you live a life of punishing yourself, your soul's not in the picture. It's all ego. The biggest ego-centric people are the people who punish themselves the most. The person who punishes himself the least is the person who's most at peace with themselves, who's most in touch with their soul nature, which is peace, right? Okay? So, when K2 matures, we get the opportunity to be more okay with ourselves. The more okay with ourselves we are, the more peace we become with ourselves, and the less karma we continue to create. And the more karma we have resolved. Because as we come to peace with ourselves, that peace is like, imagine being tortured and finally the torture stops. Oh, wow, that's peace, right? Okay? Finally I can relax. Finally I can have peace. So that's the K2 maturation. Okay, you've burned a lot of karma now, allotted you for this lifetime. You've punished yourself. You've abused yourself. You've made choices that guarantee your suffering. But now you get to stop. You get to let yourself off the torture rack. You have to unshackle yourself. One shackle, unshackle your legs, and get off the torture rack. Okay? And because you're okay with yourself, you've decided you don't deserve that anymore. You've paid your dues. You've grown out of that need. And really it is, you've just grown out of the need to suffer. We suffer because we have a need to suffer, not because the world makes us suffer, because we need it. Okay? We decided we need it. And we need it to bring us to this point of self-confrontation and the peace that comes from seeing ourselves as an incarnated being, which is a nice way of saying a defective creature. Okay? And that in accepting ourselves fully, we have peace. We're supposed to have character and individuality, which means we're supposed to have flaws. If every one of us was made perfect, we would all be the same. I would be like you, you'd be like me. We'd all be like clones of each other. Because perfect is one thing. Perfect is this pristine, perfect, you can't have individuality if you have perfection, right? Because everything would be the same. There's no room for individuality and perfection. It's our flaws that make us individuals. It's our contrasts, the mixed qualities, the unique outcast qualities of Rahu. These are what make us adorable to God. This is what makes us interesting. This is why the gods sit up in heavens and watch, favorite channel is Channel Earth, and they watch us down here. If we were all perfect, this network would have gone down a long time ago and none of the gods would have watched it. No one would be interested in watching it. It'd be like the most boring show of perfect creatures who all look alike, who all act alike. Who would watch that show, right? I sure wouldn't watch it. We want shows of character and passion and grit and humor. This is what we're meant to be. But in doing those things, we also punish ourselves. And that's the part that has to stop. So we're at peace with ourselves. But we don't lose our individuality. We're still individuals. But now we're individuals at peace instead of compensative, hiding, self-rejecting humans. Okay? So this is the gift of the K2 maturation, the gift that K2 offers you. But it's for each person to come to terms with how willing they are to be okay with themselves. How willing are you to have this gift, open this gift? But the K2 maturation is the opportunity to do that. And that opportunity comes because you face yourself. You can't get this opportunity from anything out there because the gift is something you give yourself. It's like the gift shows up, it's available to you, but you have to take it and give it to yourself. And you have to unwrap it yourself. No one can unwrap it for you, no one can give it to you. And during your K2 maturation and the years after K2 maturation, you find things that come into your life that cause you, that let's say force you, to come to terms with, are you really okay with yourself? Here's the best job opportunity ever. Are you going to take it or not? And that job is saying, are you okay with yourself enough to take this job? Or are you not? And this is when people from 48 onwards will call you and they will say, I got this job, it's like my dream job, should I take it? It's like, duh, it's your dream job, take it. Why do you want me to waste time looking at your chart? It's your dream job, take it. Why are they asking? Because they're struggling with themselves. Am I okay enough with myself to actually get my dream job? And sadly, sometimes they're not. Sometimes we're not okay enough with ourselves to get our dream job, our dream house. The K2 maturation years, 45 to 48, especially 47 and 48, those are always the year before and the year after are the big ones in every maturation. 47, 48 for K2. These are opportunities to get the best thing you've had. You know, the best job, the best financial opportunities, the best relationship, the best retirement plan, you know, whatever, something wonderful. And these things come as a test to say, are you okay enough with yourself to allow yourself to actually have something better for a change? Is it going to be perfect? No, it's not going to be perfect. It's not really going to be the dream job. It's not really going to be the dream house. It's going to have problems. It's going to have flaws. It's just going to be better than you've had. And are you willing to allow yourself to have the better or not? Are you okay with yourself to actually have a better life? That's the button the K2 maturation will push. Okay? And this doesn't always happen in the context of something saying, okay, do you want the better job? Are you okay enough with yourself to take the better opportunity? Sometimes those things come up. And they always will come up in the K2 maturation years and the years after that, especially the year right after it. Then we have to say, okay, I'm okay enough with myself to have that, to let myself have that, to have the best job I've had, the best whatever I've had. But do I really want that? Okay? It doesn't mean you have to take it. You just have to be okay with accepting the gift. Okay with taking it. But maybe you want something even better. You're allowed to say, oh, yeah, that's the best job ever. But you know, I want better. You're allowed to say that. You're also, if you have a really strong spiritual chart, you're allowed to say, yeah, I'm okay enough with myself to have that dream job, but I'm going to retire in 5 years instead because I just want to focus on my spiritual life. So I'll pass on the dream job because it's a 20-year commitment. And I'm just going to take my job that I've been dealing with, but now I go to work at peace because I'm okay with myself and I don't have all the frustrations I used to have at work. And I don't want a dream job. I want a dream spiritual life. So I'm going to focus on that. So we get to, you know, when we're more okay with ourselves, we get to make choices based on what we really want. I really want a life that's going this direction. So yes, we might say no to the gifts, but the important thing is about these opportunities that come after the K2 maturation is, Are you okay enough with yourself to let yourself have this? Will you take it? Will you say, yeah, I deserve that. I'm okay enough with myself to have a better something? First answer, yes. I'm okay enough with myself to have that best job. But is that really what I want? See, a person who's truly okay with themselves doesn't settle. They don't just say, yeah, okay, I'll take the better job. They go, okay, do I really, really want this job, though it's better than I ever thought I could deserve? But now that I know I deserve it, there's also the possibility of me deserving even more or something completely different. What gift am I really willing to give to myself? Because I'm okay with myself enough. That there's no more limitations to what I allow myself to experience. Because I'm okay enough with myself. And I just have to figure out what it is I want to experience and work towards it. And move towards it. And be okay enough with myself to earn it. Because it's not going to come free. We're still on earth. You still have to work, put the time in, work at it. If you get the dream job, you still have to go to work every day, right? You don't just get the income and the prestige. You still have to go to work from 9 to 5. If you get the dream house, you still have to, get your house. You still have to clean your house or hire someone and give them money to clean your house. It's not like the dream house just gets cleaned automatically on this planet, right? You might get the dream relationship, but that doesn't mean the relationship's going to be easy and everything's going to be perfect all the time. No, you're going to have to work to maintain your relationship. So, it's just better than you've had before. And do you allow yourself the choice of having something better? The choice means I'll take it or not in accordance with what I really want, because there's nothing in myself holding myself back from having the life I want anymore. That's what being truly psychologically healthy is. So many of our choices we make out of ill feelings about ourselves. We make limited choices. We let people into our lives. We accept job positions. We work for bosses that treat us badly, that treat us like slaves, that abuse us, that neglect us, that ignore us, da-da-da-da-da. Who deserves that? A person who doesn't feel good about themselves. K2 maturation is a time of having burnt all that karma. You've paid your dues. You can be okay with yourself now. And now how's your life going to be? That's the magic of your K2 maturation. Now you have so much more choice about how your life is going to be than you ever did before. Does that mean you have full choice? No. It just means more choice than you ever had. Okay? And hopefully, year by year, as you become more okay with yourself, that choice increases and increases and until it increases. Until you're so okay with yourself because you faced yourself that you found your soul. And now you have all choices in the world. And then you choose to be with God as the choice that's most beautiful to you. And that hopefully is something that we will all grow into year by year as the K2 after our K2 maturation until the year of our passing. Okay, thank you.